what make you keeping going?
I have so much energy in myself.
How does your childhood used to look?
Today, so, quite strict boundaries.
Your 90s, 50s and the young generation right now, what they are really lacking?
Young children don't have the capacity.
How the people used to connect with each other?
It's still a sense of foot traffic.
How does your life is being as a public speaker?
One of the things that I love, I have 3 core values: courage, creativity and connection.
What is the best thing you can tell women entrepreneurs right now?
Because women have so much more power than they recognise.
Does really Aussie culture or Aussie community support women business people?
I think the support is so much more there than...
What is your method of connecting or helping women to get into their business? Or
Because I work in the online space, I would say if this is what you wanted to do, start to look for people online.
I would like you guys to join our community and wait for the inspiring video. Hey, hi Bron, how are you?
I am really well.
Oh, thank you. It was my pleasure having you today here. So I wanted to get all your experience to my audience where, being in 60 plus and running a business, being like entrepreneur and empowering many women, that's really fabulous. So what is your opinion?
Oh, look, well, I started my business at 60. And because that's what you do, isn't it, when you turn 60? Basically because I had wanted to be a professional speaker for a long time, for years and years. I've done so much public speaking, with a background in education, and then in not-for-profit, I'd spent a lot of time public speaking. And now I thought, let's see if I can turn this ability that I have and get paid for it. And so... I thought, okay, now's the time to do it. Took my superannuation, which wasn't a lot, but it gave me some seed money to get a business started. And I knew nothing, had never been in business before, so I made it up as I went along.
So how is it building a business at your 60s?
Look, I'm not sure that it's all that much different to building it in your 30s, except you have probably less responsibilities. So I'm not trying to balance children. I started it when I didn't have a partner. So, I wasn't accountable to anybody. I could just do my own stuff. But I think too, it's one of the benefits of starting something when you're older is you actually have a lot of life experience. Like I had 6 decades of life experience. I'd done quite a few things. I'd learnt a lot. And even though I was stepping out into this void, this unknown of doing business, I had a lot that I could still call on, of my own reserves, of resilience, of things that I understood, experiences, skills, insights, those sorts of things. So I think that's a plus of actually starting a business when you're older.
Yeah, that's really appreciated. But from my view, at this point, at 60s, many Aussies wanted to just retire and, have a peaceful life. What make you keeping going?
There's a lovely little meme that talks about, I don't want to just roll into my grave. I want to go in and skid in sideways. It's that idea that I have so much energy. Obviously my body is slower, but I have so much energy in myself, and there are things I want to achieve, things I want to do. And I am a grandmother. I have 6 grandchildren, but I don't want to just be a grandmother. I don't want to spend my life revolving around my children and my grandchildren. They're special, but I was born Bronwyn. I'm going to die Bronwyn. So it's Bronwyn who needs to get the stuff done that she wants to do. And so that's why I'm doing it.
Yeah, that's really great actually. At this point, because getting that energy and positive mindset is a lot important, very important, because 90% of the portion people don't even try to push them at this point. They just want to get relaxed and have a peaceful life at care centers or something. And coming to your childhood, how does your childhood used to look?
Well, I was born in the 50s, grew as a child in the 60s. so very different to how children are raised today. So, quite strict boundaries. I'm the eldest in my family and I'm a girl, so there were quite strict boundaries around what a girl can do or should do, be the good girl. A happy home, a stable home, we were well fed, didn't have buckets of money, grew up in suburban Sydney, but, it was a stable, happy, fairly normal upbringing, had a strong church background, so, that was, the church community was very much part of growing up. So, look, I think as much as I can see there were limitations with my growing up, because my parents had very set ideas about, what life should be like, I think that stability, though, gave me a good foundation as well. So, so there's always positives and negatives about your childhood.
So the reason why I wanted to talk about your childhood is I wanted to carry the differentiation between your 90s, 50s and the young generation right now, what they are really lacking.
Okay, because as I said, I've got grandchildren. So I've got grandchildren growing up. My grandchildren range in age from 20 down to 7, so they're a big mix. What do they lack? I think as much as like social media, technology is good things, and I love technology. I'm very much keep up to date with technology. I think there's this sense of unreality about the online space. I know for myself as a woman in business, I curate what goes out onto social media. I'm very careful about what I put out. It is the highlight reel. Every so often I'll, post something more personal to sort of give people a bit of insight into who is Bronwyn. However, I think young children don't have the capacity to see the difference between what someone puts up as a curated personality online, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or whatever platform you're using, and what that person is really like. And I think that's one of the things that people in the entrepreneurial space also struggle with, because we see everybody else's highlight reel.
Yes.
We see somebody, they post themselves standing next to a beautiful car, or this is my office for the day, and all you can see is their toes and their laptop and the pool. But we don't see the I was going to use the word grind, I don't like that so much, just the behind the scenes stuff, which is the normal stuff of, taking, like I did today. I had a gig booked for tomorrow. It's now postponed till a month's time. That then you have to shift all your cash flow because of that. None of that is put out onto social media, and I think that's one of the things that entrepreneurs have in common with children in this at this point in history, because we have what goes out on social media and what real life is like. Hopefully adults know the difference, but I don't think children do, and I think that's a difficulty for kids.
Yeah, this was like quite impressive, because that's true, because they always highlight their unreality, and when they are happy for few seconds, they post only that 1 second, but rest of the 24 hours they don't show what they're really doing now.
Well, no, they don't show themselves, clipping their toenails, or all of the ordinary things that every human being does. They don't make it onto social media.
Yeah, people need to understand the process of reality shown in the social media. As just before we are having a conversation about the online dating apps, I was like, I was too far away from those ones. Yes. So understanding about the business, because when you started at 90s 50, you don't have any social media in Australia. How does it look, and how to if there is any startup idea at that point, how the people used to connect with each other and try to build their business?
Well, it was obviously bricks and mortar businesses back in the 1950s and the 1960s, and it really depended on foot traffic. People literally walking past and coming into your shop. However, I see there's a similarity. So even though, like, my business is not bricks and mortar, my business is an online business, I will turn up in real life to do a keynote presentation or run a workshop. But to get to that point where I'm actually physically in front of someone, everything else is done online or over the telephone. And yet it's still a sense of foot traffic, which might be how many people see my post, how many people I make connections with on, whatever platform I am, how many people I send an email to, how many people I send a direct message to. That's the foot traffic that once was physical foot traffic down the footpath and into the shop is now digital foot traffic. So it's the same concept, just done differently.
Yeah. Can you explain me a little bit more about those process? Because there's like a lot to learn from that particular topic.
If you take a bricks and mortar business, and when you asked me about that, the one business that I remember is Mrs. Hyams. Now, Mrs. Hyam had the health food shop in Caringbah, down in the Sutherland Shire in New South Wales, and they made their own potato crisps, and you could go and buy a little white paper bag of potato crisps for something like, well, it would have been sixpence. That's really how old I am. Back in the days before decimal currency. But we knew about this. Mum knew about Mrs. Hyams. That was the shop that we walked past, and we would walk into on our way home, pick up a packet of crisps, and come home. Now, if you translate that, or I'll take another step back. We went into Mrs. Hyam's shop, but not everybody who walked past Mrs. Hyam's shop actually went in. Not everybody liked a health food shop. Not everybody wanted to buy things at a health food shop. But Mrs. Hyams needed to have a certain number of people walking past her shop before she would get the number of people into her shop who would then buy something. I think it's very much the same in the digital space. You have to have a certain number of people walking past your shop, whatever that is. For me, that's my LinkedIn profile. That's my shop front. I have to have a certain number of people seeing what I have to offer. That's my 5 posts a week on LinkedIn. And it's the people that, walk past my shop, see what I have to offer, some will buy. So I think it's the same principle. It's just not done physically now as it used to be.
Yep. But it was really interesting. I want to tell you something. Actually, the process you explained me right now, it was quite really impressive. It is like in any business, I think there are 2 types of business. One is product and one is service. But you have explained to me both, including the product and service in the same pattern, which was like quite impressive.
Oh, thank you.
So coming to the public speaker, how does your life is being as a public speaker?
When I was 8, my mother said she was going to get a record made. It said, "Bronwyn, be quiet." So obviously I've been able to talk and talk well for a long period of my life. But one of the things that I love, I have 3 core values: courage, creativity, and connection. And being a professional speaker is all about connection. Like in my first act of life, I was a teacher. And although teaching is about obviously imparting knowledge, it's also making a connection with the children in your class. And particularly as a primary school teacher, you have them for a year, so you build a relationship with them. In the keynote space, you have to do that within the first 30 seconds. Somehow build a connection with your audience. Because if you're going to be speaking to them for 45 minutes, you want them to have connected with you very quickly. I love doing workshops because I get to spend a whole day with people, and I love that more intimate, more connected space. But yeah, I love being able to share out of either my knowledge or my insight and my wisdom, and I love being able to connect to people and using words well to do that.
And what is that one thing made you to become an entrepreneur? Because
Can I just say I wanted to?
yeah, because I want to stop you for 1 second, because right now when you're speaking about the life in public speaking, you're so fascinated, interested, and you wanted to be in that position. And then what is the reason that one particular thing changed into being a particular entrepreneur?
As I said, I was probably in my 40s when I thought this is something I would like to do, but there's a whole lot of life things going on. So it took 20 years then for the time to be right. The catalyst was so in my second active life, I was working with the Salvation Army. I'd trained with them as a Salvation Army officer, and the Salvation Army do look after their officers really well into retirement, but you have to have had a certain number of years' service to be eligible for that. And because I joined the Salvation Army in my 50s, even by the time I got to 65 or 67 to retirement age, I wouldn't have had the longevity of service to be eligible for their retirement package, for want of a better word. So I knew that at some point I was going to have to look after myself. And I figured, let's do it sooner rather than later. Let's not wait till 67 to start. Let's start at 60, which is when I was able to access my superannuation. And so it was that sense of having a position where I had some money and I still had energy. And so those two things combined, that really was the catalyst to say now is the right time.
Yep. Being an entrepreneur, how is it going? Is it like super crazy?
It's starting to make sense.
Yes. I know. You need to enjoy the process. When you enjoy the process, that's like always every day you see as in new things.
Well, look, I have often said, what else am I going to do with my life? I am not, yes, I have grandchildren, but I'm not the knit booties grandmother. And there are so many things I still want to do and see and be part of. And, I've got a curious mind. I'm always inquiring about things. And, I just love the idea of, I've used that term before, making it up as I go along. I used to think that was a bad thing. Now I recognise that that's actually how it goes. That if you've got an idea about something, whether it's a bricks and mortar business, I want to have, you've got products, you've developed some skincare, or you've developed a clothing range, or whether, like me, you've got a service. You start with that idea, and then you have to make that idea real, because I still have to have products, I still have to have a keynote, I still have to have a workshop, I still need to have, a highlight reel and a speaker reel and a speaker brochure. I actually physically, even if it's digitally, pass things on to people. So where I am now, and my focus is very different to what it was when I started. But I know now too that that's actually quite normal. You start with this idea and think this is what I want to do, and then it develops over time.
But it's not easy to transform such fastly too, because you can't flip the coin with like second. You need a lot of patience to understand the process, how it goes, and to shift your ideology into particular business.
Oh, it does. I think sometimes you don't even know what you know. And that's one of the things I've learnt too, is that, and that's where I see a good mentor or coach is really useful. And, if you get to a point where you've got the money to be able to invest in that, I'd certainly recommend it, because they often can see things that you can't, or they at least ask the questions that you go, oh, yes, oh, I can do that. Yeah, I know, so they draw those things out from you. Yeah, yes. Because we have a lot more wisdom, insight and skill than we give ourselves credit for.
Yes. So being a woman entrepreneur, have you seen any criticism or like something bad in the society?
Well, look, women still face hurdles that men don't have to face. And that is, we live in a patriarchal culture, and most cultures across the world are patriarchal, and that's just the way it is. And I'm not trying to bash men or, say, bring down the patriarchy. But, that's the system within which we all operate. But it's not a system that favours women. And so there is a very much sense in which women have to work harder, they have to be better, they have to do more to prove themselves. In the speaking space, women are often asked to speak for free for exposure. And I know during our initial conversation, I asked about investment, and because that you start to anticipate that if you're going to do something, it's going to cost you to do it. I've just recently, Jane Caro, the Australian journalist, she posted on LinkedIn just about this, that, as someone who is well known, like she's written a book and she's well known in Australia, she still gets asked to do stuff for free. And I'm thinking, why? You would never, because rarely do men get asked to, if they're a well-known speaker, to do something for nothing. Like speakers will do stuff pro bono if they feel that the organisation fits with their values and they want to volunteer their services, and I've done that. But don't ask me to do it for nothing when you're charging people to come to your conference. Yeah, so I think there's those things. And I think too that there's been a sense in which women haven't always been taken seriously. The whole emotional thing, men can get angry, but they're not called emotional or hysterical. And yet, if you see a man when he's really angry, well, it can be a bit over the top. And yet women are faced with, well, if a woman gets angry and maybe a bit teary, well, we just write them off as hysterical. So I think there's inequities in it that women still have to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have seen these things, but really, do you really think that women are underrated?
Are they underrated?
Like, regarding their work or regarding their payments, everything?
Totally. Yeah, I would say completely. I think less so now, certainly less so than back in the 1960s. But I still think women are underrated, and that's part of why I do what I do, is to help women really reconnect with their own power, because I know I've had to do that for myself, because I was told for so many years to sit down, be quiet and play small. I don't want to do that anymore. And I don't want other women to do that either.
But I don't think it's not in all the cases. Only at some point of the time they are underrated, but not all the times.
Yeah, see, I think it's probably more than you realise. Yeah. Again, and this is not, I'm not trying to be critical of you, but men don't see what women deal with. Just as I, as a white woman in Australia, do not see what you may have to deal with because of the colour of your skin. Now, I don't know what your experience has been like in Australia, but I do know that, Australia has its racial issues and we're not good at owning it, especially the white people. We're not good at owning our racism. And I will never know what it's like to face racism because of the colour of my skin, and that's just a fluke. You will never know what it's like to be a woman and face the things that women face because you're born a man. It's just the way it is.
So being a woman and being an immigrant, like how the women need to deal with the racist like boss or somebody else in the workplace.
Oh, I wish they didn't have to.
But as you told,
if I could wave a magic wand, that's what I'd do. I'm going to give you an example. I have a dear friend. She was actually the attendant at my wedding last year. Born in Sri Lanka, intelligent woman, has a master's degree. She and her husband were working together. He's white, and a complaint was put in her workplace about the way she spoke and her attitude. But even when her husband said, "But look, I do the same thing," the management just took my friend, and the way she was treated was a mix of sexism and racism. And I said that to her, and she couldn't see it. But to me, it was just glaring because she was the one being blamed for this incident when both of them were involved, but her white husband was not. All I could do with my friend was to help her see what was going on if she couldn't see it for herself, and to stand with her and tell her the truth. This is what you're up against. And I'm on the board of an organisation that's working with women, migrant women from Africa, and some of them are so intelligent, and yet I know, because they're Muslims too. So you throw into the mix being a woman, being dark-skinned, and being a Muslim, that they face so many barriers, more than I will ever face. And there's a sense in which I can't advise them because I've never been in their shoes. However, all I can say is to support each other, to find your communities, and that's what I see is happening with this charity. They are working with people in that women and their families in that situation, because it's going to be a long time before we eradicate racist and sexist attitudes, because they're so ingrained in our thinking. So we've got to just support each other and call it out when we can and as we can. And I think that's really hard to do.
Yes.
It's hard to call it out because we then put ourselves in the firing line.
It's completely, horrible to judge somebody from their skin, from their appearance, and from their speaking skills, from their color mainly. To be frank, I have gone through those things. I have faced a lot of racism in when I came to Australia, but I don't say right now I don't have anything, but because it's changed culturally, lot things has been changed. People are educated more right now. Now they understand the process of being multicultural, and they are being friends with each and every. I see, but internally I see there is a little bit ongoing in their mind, but externally they don't show anything.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. One of the things that I do talk about is unconscious bias, and that's that first thought
Yes.
that says, can I trust this person because they don't look like me? But then it's the choice that you make after that. Like half the time you cannot stop your brain from going to that place first.
Yes.
But then you can make a choice. Once you're aware of it, you can make the choice. How am I going to respond? Am I going to allow that thought to be the thing that guides me? Or am I going to look at this person in front of me and see the person, not just their skin colour or their accent?
In the first place, subconsciously, you should not keep that intention in your mind. So that makes easy. In the first place, when you try to shake your hands, when you introduce yourself, you should not see them in a different way. First, talk to them, see whether they are good at what they are doing. Then, if they are not in your space, just do your work. That's it. Don't need to be judged by their color or their way of living, or maybe from their culture. No, those things are very, very uncomfortable for the immigrants here.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree with
So
you.
being such a great experienced person, so what is the best thing you can tell women entrepreneurs right now?
Because women have so much more power than they recognise. And I still believe there is messaging that women hear around, sit down, be quiet, play small. And we buy into that, unfortunately. So we have to trust ourselves. Trust your gut. We call it women's intuition. Trust your gut. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. If it does feel right, go for it. If you've got an idea, run with it. If it doesn't work, at least you know, and try something else. So I think, women have the most amazing. I think women they're connected, they're collaborative, there's so much creativity, they have so many skills. My goodness, any person who has raised children has a whole swathe of skills, from conflict resolution, through to, career guidance. That's what a mother gets to do with her kids. You have so many skills. Just believe in yourself. Don't let the messaging be the thing that shapes you.
So does really Aussie culture or Aussie community support women business people?
I think I think the support is so much more there than it was a number of years ago. And there are a lot of women who are leaving the corporate space because it's a patriarchal structure and it doesn't work for them. And so, women are going out on their own. They're providing service-based business, product-based business, because they can do it with flexibility. Young women who have got little children, they're doing it, they're running their business between 8 and 10 at night after the kids are off to bed. Women have this capacity to be flexible and just get stuff done, because you've just got to sometimes. So, I think the space is much better. Like, I would never, when I was a child, I would never thought I would be sitting here doing a podcast like this. I would never have thought I could do a Zoom call. Like, that's the thing of science fiction. I never dreamed that I could build a business, but I can because it's all opened up
Yes.
in the last 60
As I
years.
told you, it is always underrated. You underrate yourself in the first place. You don't know what you are capable of. You need to believe it, then start working on that. That's it. It will be, it will fall apart when it goes on the road. That's it. Yep.
That's right.
So, what is the current stage of women entrepreneurship in Australia?
Oh, that's a really broad question, isn't it? And I'm not sure that I can give you a definitive answer. The things that I've observed is that more women are deciding that they want to take control of their own finances. They want to be able to be financially secure. They no longer see the need to be dependent on a man for that. And so they're looking at ways in which they can make sure that they are financially secure. And one of those is having some sort of business of their own. And I've seen a number of people, as I said, women stepping out of the corporate space after 10, 20, 25 years because they can no longer take the stuff that goes on. They've been banging their head against the glass ceiling. They're having to put up with attitudes that do tell them to sit down, be quiet, play small, and so they've basically saying, I don't want to do that anymore, and they step out and do something for themselves.
So, really, the communities and maybe family persons are helping them to do those things?
I think you'd have to, if you're in a relationship, you need to have the support of your partner, particularly if you're going to take a financial hit because of it, because it is a risk. It's always a risk if you decide not to no longer have that regular paycheck coming in. So yeah, I think it's hard if a woman doesn't have the support of the people who she lives with. But I think men are starting to understand too that women want to do these things, and they're not just about being homemakers or mothers, and that they're really wanting to support. And I, as we talked about earlier, I got married again for the second time last year, and my husband is hugely supportive of what I do. He tells me all the time that he's proud of me, and that makes a huge difference to me, because that gives me a stability to go and do things that I would not perhaps have done on my own, or if I didn't have a partner who wasn't supportive.
Yes, for the family women, it's very hard. Really, it's very hard when there is no support from the family or the partners. It is quite harder to get out and do the things. So, to those women who wanted to balance their lifestyle and into entrepreneurship, what is your best suggestion?
What I'd say would be to work it out. I was going to say work it out for yourself, because everybody's situation is different. Sometimes, if a woman's got, this is the thing. We always say, yes, women are, we are still the ones who have to carry babies, genetically, that's how we're made. And yet, we are still saying it has to be the woman who has to balance her life because there are children in the household. Man, woman, it's only when those two come together that children are made. Why are we still insisting that it's the woman who must balance her life around her children? What about the man balancing his life? I worked with a man a number of years ago, and he had made the conscious choice to promote his wife's career and then just to do whatever jobs he could do to balance out the family finances. And he's done that. His wife is an educator and she's making a huge career, but he made that choice. I don't see that happening very often. I take my hat off to him because he has said, my wife has a career, she has passion and drive, which he doesn't have those things. And that's not a fault, it's just different personalities, and he's decided he was the one who's then going to balance. And I think that's where we need to get to, not just telling women how to balance children and a job, but helping the family, the partnership say, well, how are we as a couple going to both have a career and balance our family? I think that's where we need to get to.
Yeah, it's always about both sides, not from a single side. You need to understand and support each other. That's where you will reach to a point where you will be enjoying the space too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it indirectly it gives you a lot of connection. Emotionally, you will be so gratefully connected to each other while building something. It's all just understanding.
It is. And look, I love seeing dads out running with the kid in the stroller. Like that did not happen in my generation. It was definitely the women who going out for a walk with the kid in the stroller. So fathers benefit from having that sort of time with their children as well. Like it's a win-win.
That's really impressive. So, what is your method of connecting or helping women to get into their business or?
Because I work in the online space, I would say if this is what you're wanting to do, start to look for people online, whatever platform, like depending on your business. I use LinkedIn because it's a professional site that works for me. For some people, Instagram, if you've got a product-based business, Instagram is really good because it's visual. Facebook is quite good for coaches and people like that. So it doesn't really matter what your platform is. Find people on those platforms who are doing what you're doing and learn from them. You know, send out the friend request, the connection request. Check out what they're posting. Learn from them. I think that's the best way to do it because there's no school to go to to learn to be an entrepreneur. You know, there's no academic course that you can take. You can get skilled up to give you, like I have a Cert 4 in training and assessment, which is really good in my role. But I needed, and I still do, I need to learn from people who have done what I want to do.
Yes.
So that would be my best.
No schools can teach you what real life is. It's all about experience, how you wanted to do things, and it's always like learning something every day.
It is, and before you know it, you will be the person who is the inspiration for others.
Yep. So, what is the best quality a woman need to improve themselves to be a businesswoman?
Say be themselves. That's really important. Don't try to be like learn from others, but don't try to be like somebody else. If you know, like if you're a young mum and you are starting a business, so you still have children who are dependent on you. You literally can't be going out to networking events at night. It's just a physical impossibility. So don't try to be like them. Find other ways to network. So yeah, be yourself. Land in the space that you are. Know that that's valid. You don't need to be like anybody else. You know, the whole stay in your own lane. You know, put away the measuring tape. These are all things I've had to learn. I only know this now because I've done
lot thinking.
I've done all those things. You know, I've compared myself with other people. I've wanted to be like other people, but I've learnt that if I am Bronwyn, that's the best thing that I can be. So trust yourself, be yourself, start where you are. It's okay to start where you are.
I think comparing yourself with somebody really judges your own skills. That puts you down always.
Yeah.
So that's not acceptable for me. Okay. So how important is self-reflection in leadership development for women?
Right up here. It is probably one of the most important skills is to not only reflect on the interactions that you've had, but on your own responses to people, because we get a lifetime to know ourselves. And like that's the journey of being a human being, is getting to know ourselves, and it's a wonderful journey. And so, yeah, developing self-awareness, developing the art of self-reflection, they're huge, because I think most people have been under a leader who is not self-aware. And, you know, they blame everybody else, they put too much work on other people, they don't have an understanding of themselves, and therefore they don't have an understanding of other people. So self-awareness, self-reflection, and that then gives you the ability to have empathy and compassion, which are really strong leadership skills.
Yep. Self-analyzing, and as you told, that plays a key role in understanding each other and building a proper team in the business.
Yeah, That's right. And allow yourself to, or give yourself the grace and the kindness to let stuff bubble up. Like, I still am learning or reflecting, connecting the dots from things that happened 20 years ago. But it's because I'm in a happy space now that some of those things that were difficult are coming up, and I'm going, oh, I see them in a different light. And now, because I see them in a different light, my mindset set shifts. We have to allow ourselves the grace to feel the uncomfortable emotions too sometimes, because they teach us things
Yes.
that we'll never learn when we're just happy, clappy.
Yes. When you are pushed down, that's where you start learning things.
Yeah.
That's really, core role which will give you more visibility to play the game better. I love that game, because if somebody is pushing you harder, that means you need to raise in like higher. So coming to the other point, how do you help women identify their core values in the society for the business?
That's a good question, because that's something I bring into one of my keynotes. Because I see identifying our values is one of the 5 things that women in leadership need to be able to do. And it's as simple as literally Googling lists of values off the web. You might come up with a page that's got 50 different words on it. Choose 6 that resonate with you, and then get that down to 3. Because like 3 is this magic number. It's it's more than a pair, and we have more than 3 was hard to remember. But you get down to 3, and as I said, my 3 are courage, creativity, and connection. And when we can identify and remember what our values are, we can shape our businesses according to that. We can assess whether the decisions that we're making are in line with those values as well. And those are my 3, but it could be honesty, it could be punctuality. There's so many different things that people value. Find a list, check out 6, bring it down to 3.
Yeah, depending on their own skills, you need to organize your own things, how much you wanted to be super success. So you can decide, because you have divided into 3, break it into 3, I can break it into 1 if I want it. So it depends on each and every person.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think 3 is a good number in that it gives us, because we are more complex than just one value. I think that's the thing. We are more complex than just one value. If I had to prioritize those 3, I think now connection would be my number 1, followed by courage, and then by creativity. But there have been times in my life where courage was my number 1.
Oh,
So they can shift.
Yes,
they
yes,
can shift spots.
depending on place you're working, what exactly you wanted to achieve, it try to fluctuate the process.
Yeah, and it's also where you are in life and
Yes.
what you're experiencing in life. I left a 28-year marriage. That took courage. Courage was the thing that I hung on to for years. That was my number 1 value.
And
Just
that is
keep
the first
stepping
step.
out into the
Yes.
void.
Yes, and that gives you, if you once have that feeling of courage, actually you can, in the first place, you have already achieved it. So you don't need to be scared after second step.
Yeah, and see, that's interesting, because I think we can still feel fear and show courage at the same time.
Yes, yes. You can't, subconsciously you will feel fear, but as a human brain, it works like, okay, let's do it. It pushes you a little bit harder in the first place.
And I've developed a technique for myself when fears come up, because they do come like just staring you in the face, and I say to the fear, that is one scenario. And because that's the reality, a fear is one scenario, one thing that could happen. But if we focus on it, it gets bigger and bigger.
Yes.
But if we just see it as one option that could happen with our lives, then I often find it just slips away.
Yes.
Then it's like a little child who just wants to be noticed. Hello, I'm here. Oh, I see you. Okay, then you can run away.
Yes. So subconsciously, you should not feel any problem as a problem in the first place.
Well, I think there actually are problems you know, managing your cash flow when you have a gig postponed. That's actually a problem. I then had to talk with the organizer of that about how I was going to get paid. You know, like that was a problem that needed to be resolved in that space. So I think we can have problems, but two of my values came out. Courage. I had the courage to say to her, yes, I'm happy to postpone this. However, can I ask that when it does happen, can I be paid on receipt rather than 30 days? You know, if you push it out to 30 days, that, you know, changes your cash flow. So that took courage, but it was also because I already had developed a working relationship with this person, so we had a connection. So that's where our values come into play all the time, but we must choose to act out of.
Yes, what you're going to do. It's all about you, where in the first place you give priority to what. So if you don't want to get paid, you can negotiate in the other process. So, hey, I can get something else, or else you can get invoice maybe after a couple of days. It depends on how you negotiate too.
Oh,
Yes.
it is, but you don't know what you can negotiate until you ask that first question.
Yes. So, what are the hurdles do women entrepreneurs face in Australia in the first place?
Look, I think probably the same as men do, in that it's hard to get momentum. That's probably one of the first hurdles with any business, isn't it? Is getting it off the ground and then getting sufficient momentum so that you're getting, say, inbound requests for services or products. I think that's a hurdle, and you've literally just got to keep going until that happens, because you never know when a business is going to take off. There's no magic point in which all of a sudden, you know, people are asking for your product or service. So that, you know, just know that that's a hurdle. You've just got to keep pushing that wheelbarrow one-handed uphill until you get to the top of the hill. Unfortunately, you don't know where the top of the hill is. So I think that's a hurdle. One of the things that is still a huge issue for women is investment. There are very, very few women are the recipients of angel investment or seed funding. So there's still a sense in which female-based businesses or female-founded businesses are not seen as legitimate as ones that are founded by men, even though they are, but they're not perceived to be that. So I think financially, women have that's a hurdle. Probably one of the biggest hurdles that women have to get over.
Yes. So how crucial is networking for women entrepreneurs? Because I wanted to put this question very particular, because you told that when woman is a family holding things, she can't go to the events at night time. So at that point, how she can organize her network to be grown?
Well, there are, and as I've been part of, there are networks that operate during the day. So there's always that. It's find daytime networks. There's also, because I thought after I'd said that, negotiate with your partner so that he minds your children, you know, the children of the family, so that you can go out at night. So that sometimes there's negotiation within the relationship too, that is a possibility as well. So it's about exploring either the physical options that you have of being able to go to things during the day, you know, when the kids are at school, or negotiate with your partner, get a babysitter, whatever it takes, if you feel that the event at night is something that you would really be of value to you. But that's, again, about assessing your priorities and what you see as important.
You have spoke about conscious bias. How can women address it and recognize it?
I have identified I talk about a 4-step process. The first is to notice what triggers are happening in your body, and they can be emotional or physical, because we will react to what other people say or do, but often it's not like a thought. It's we might feel, shoulders get tense, weight on your chest, stomach churns a bit, or you can feel threatened or upset. That's actually your body telling you that something is happening that your brain hasn't yet caught up with. So our bodies are an amazing have this amazing capacity to communicate things to us, so either physically or through our emotions, that often sort of cognitively we haven't figured out yet. So the first step to identifying our own biases is to notice what our body is telling us, or that our body is telling us something. The second thing then is to ask ourselves some questions. What's just happened that has, triggered this response in me? Is it a situation that you've been placed in? Is it something that someone has said to you? A passing comment, casual racism, casual sexism. Is it someone's attitude that's come out? Has somebody asked you to do something that you're not comfortable with? So you ask questions about the experience. Then the third step is to look at what are the stories or narratives in your own life that relate to this particular situation. Now, and where I first started to understand this was when I was working with the Salvation Army on Nauru and working with asylum seekers. So I was, I'd grown up in the Sutherland Shire in New South Wales, in Sydney. You couldn't get any place that was more conservative, more white, more middle class, very traditional. That was where I grew up, and right through until into my 50s, I'd largely mixed with white people who looked like me, sounded like me, thought like me. And then I landed on Nauru, which is a Pacific Island nation, so I'm mixing with Pacific Island culture, and then with a whole lot of asylum seekers who came from Afghanistan and Pakistan and Iran and Iraq and Sri Lanka. So people who are very different to me. And that's what I started. My body was getting tense, and I had to ask myself some questions. What's going on? Then it was then that I started to think about, well, what are the stories in my life around these sorts of situations where things were different? And I thought back over my life having, even though I had a really solid, safe childhood, there was this underlying, and my parents were not overtly racist, but there was this underlying thing that people who were different to us were somehow not right.
Okay,
That they were wrong, whether they didn't, believe the same or go to the same church as us or whatever. So there was this sense in which difference was a threat, and that was the narrative that I recognised, that I started to see in my life. So my body was telling me something. I asked myself some questions, identified the narratives, and we've all got narratives. Like we're all taught things as kids about, who's safe, who's good, who to trust, who to dismiss. And it was at that point that I had to recognise that I had a latent racism. And that wasn't something that I had deliberately fostered or that my parents had fostered in me, but largely from growing up with white Australia, where I'd never had to mix with people who were different to me, and that the white way of thinking was accepted as the norm. I realised that I had built into me this latent racism, and I didn't like that. That didn't fit with how I saw myself, but I had to own it, because what we don't recognise and what we don't own, we can't address. So I had to own that. And it was then that I could then flip that narrative that was saying that difference is a threat. I could flip that on its head and go, difference is an asset.
Yes.
And now I see that people who are different to me have things to offer that I don't, because they have a different cultural background, a different faith background, even different language background. That there's nuances to difference that just add so much. So they're the 4 steps I'd say. Listen to your body and your emotions. Ask yourself some questions about what's been going on. Think about what are the narratives, the stories that you've grown up with, and then have the courage to actually name the bias for what it is, even if you don't like it. Because once you've named it, you then get the choice as to what you do with that. It's when you've, in a sense, brought that bias, you've made that bias conscious, you moved it out of the subconscious into the conscious realm, that's when you can decide, well, how am I then going to deal with the world?
I think it's all about reaction and response. I think I suggest every woman, if you are in that position, instead of reacting, just respond. Just take your own time,
Yep.
then respond for it. If you react, then it keeps hurting you always.
It does. And you,
Yes.
not only does it keep hurting you, you keep hurting other people.
Yes, yes. So, how important is self reflection in leadership development in women?
More naturally self-reflective
Mm.
than men. And I'm not exactly sure why. I know I've heard men say that they don't like that idea because they're scared of what they'll find. And I keep saying, well, actually, there aren't any monsters living inside of us. Most of us, are decent human beings. But it does take courage to look at ourselves and to learn about ourselves, because we all have perceptions of ourselves, like I did around racism. I didn't see myself, I would have said I didn't have a racist bone in my body. That's how I saw myself. But the reality was different. So self-reflection allows you to see the reality and stop fooling yourself.
So, about the racism, do you think Australia is extremely racist country?
Scale to 1 to 10, probably an 8.
Oh, seriously? I think it's changed right now
Yeah,
compared
look,
to.
yeah, it probably is changing. But the thing that I see is that we still haven't owned it. We have not, and I'm saying we as white Australians, well, and this, take the voice referendum from last year. It didn't get up. Why didn't it get up? Because people were either apathetic, they didn't know enough, and so therefore, if you don't know, vote no. Like, that's a stupid slogan, but it worked. It fed into, oh, this is all too hard, I couldn't be bothered. And there was a whole lot of fear around it. So if we can't even do that, then I still think we've got a racist and a racism problem, particularly with the First Nations people in Australia. But I think there is still a flow-on effect to immigrants as well.
Yep. Being such a great racist, is it a threat for others?
I think so. Well, the say information out of the Northern Territory and the Western Australia about incarceration rates of Indigenous people, the racial profiling, it's still dangerous. It's dangerous if you're a First Nations person. It's not dangerous for me, but it is for them. So yeah, I think it is still dangerous. We don't necessarily have overt racism. We're not, as is in our white Australian past. We are not chaining Indigenous Australians together. We're not using them as slaves. However, so it's not overt, but it is still there. It's subtle, and in many ways, I think that's harder to deal with because we can pretend that there's not a problem.
Yes, I think even government is supporting Aboriginals very in a high range matter, where if I think the population is getting wiped out, so government is taking a lot of safety measures regarding protecting their communities.
Yeah, they make up about 3% of the population, so it's not a huge percentage. However, they are the longest living continuous civilization on the planet. So, they deserve some respect and kudos for having survived us white Australians for that length of time too.
They deserve that.
But yeah, would they do, and I think there's acknowledgement that we still need to deal culturally, in culturally sensitive ways with First Nations people, and that is getting better.
Yes. So coming back to the business point, what are some ways women can assist themselves more confidently in leadership portion?
How can they be more confident?
Yep.
Again, I think it comes back to believing in yourself and not listening to the voices, whether it's your own voice, in your head, or the voices in the boardroom or the team that is basically telling you to be quiet. Because women do know what it's like to be spoken over in a team situation, where they present an idea and it gets shot down, and a man 2 minutes later comes up with the same idea and everybody goes, it's wonderful. Like, those sorts of things still exist. So they're still the hurdles that women have to face. But all I can say is just keep talking, just keep saying what it is that you have to say, because what you have to say is valid. So believe in yourself, find allies. Like, there are men who are seeing these patterns and will be allies, whether it's in a supportive role or calling it out at the table. So, believe in yourself, find the male allies, find the female allies as well. Find ways to talk to, whether it's your manager or your supervisor, and say, look, this is what I observed, this is what I experienced. Yeah, don't be silent.
Yep. So supporting wise, women supporting women also important. What is your opinion on this?
There's a wonderful quote that says, there's a special place in hell for women who do not support women. I understand where that's coming from, but there are certain women, particularly certain women in Australia, who I do not support because their values are not the same as mine. They have the right to have those values and to speak out. There are women who've been in the political sphere who are incredibly racist. I do not support that, and I do not support them because of that. However, women, we can be unsupportive of each other without it being necessarily based on a clash of values. I think some of it has come about because like I've talked about patriarchal structures. Like, that's just the reality. Men have been in business, academia, science, sport for millennia. So whatever systems and structures there are have been set up around them and what suits them. And, I'm not trying to have a go at that. That's just the reality. And so women have come into that space in the last couple of 100 years. And so they've learnt the rules of what I call the rules of the sandbox, and so they've played by the rules of the sandbox, and oftentimes that has meant there's only been a few places for women in leadership, and so to maintain your place means you have to cut somebody else down. So I think those things are starting to be recognised now, and women starting to see we don't have to cut each other down. There is, it's not a limited pie. We're not fighting over a certain number of pieces in the pie. It's not a zero-sum game. So yes, I think it's important to support each other, but give yourself the grace to say, I'm not going to support someone, male or female, whose values don't align with my own.
That's really quite impressive. So what trends do you see shaping women entrepreneurs in the next decade?
I think there will be a lot more women in business. I think there will be, not just in the established businesses, but what I see is, like, before the Industrial Revolution, there was the cottage industry where, there was the basket weavers, there were the coopers, making the barrels, there was the blacksmith, there were women, who were weaving, all of those things. There were all of these little home-based businesses. The Industrial Revolution then, threw all that up in the air, and they could do things so much faster. In a sense, I see there's a return to that. In that we have so many more home-based businesses, and this is where women have, I think, the upper hand in a sense, because women often are the ones who are making the home, and they're doing the nurturing of the children, they're physically feeding the children, all of those things. So women are very good at connecting the dots and making things happen. And so I see that there will be a lot more home-based businesses, whether that's, literally like me, I've got a studio in the backyard and that's the office, or it's, a desk in the corner. So I see that women will be doing that a lot more, and there will be a lot more service-based and product-based businesses, but a lot more service-based businesses. Like, there are services available now. I got friends who have businesses very broadly, the holistic health space, which wasn't even available when I was a kid. So there are industries coming up which I think women will step into more and more. So there's a sense in which we're going back to that cottage pre-industrial revolution idea of people being able to develop their own businesses. And this is where I think women will have the upper hand, because they've always had to make do and be flexible. And and this is one of the negatives for men, I believe, about patriarchal systems, is they are also fed a message that says a man must work like this. A man must, like my father did, go to work 5 days a week from 9 till 5. That's what a man does. Whereas there are men who would love to be able to step out into the entrepreneurial space, but because their messaging tells them that's not what a man does, they're stuck too. So I see that maybe women will be leading the way in this, and also being able to show men that they can do this as well. Men can set up yoga retreats, or they can set up a woodworking studio in their backyard, because that's the creative space that they are made for. Because not all men are designed to work in factories or in the boardroom.
Yes, it is, because adding more to your point, I seen from last 10 years I have seen women coming out and doing business like extremely. They are successful, they are equally valued.
Absolutely.
Yes, I know that. So what role do you think the government policies play support in Australian women entrepreneurship?
Oh gosh, but I do think that when we see, and this is, I'm not trying to be in favour of a particular political party, but the current government has more women than men in the cabinet. That's the very first time that any government of any description, of any shade or colour, has had more women in the cabinet than men. Now that in itself is a wonderful thing. So you're going to have female perspectives, women's perspectives there. But just even that fact that it's seen that that's a good thing to do. So I see if the government can set the standard, then like that, they're so visible.
Yes.
That whole, you can't be what you can't see. But if we can see it, then changes will come. And I do think we're talking about, like, menopause is now being talked about in the workplace, and the impact of menopause. We're talking about women's reproductive health and the issues that women have reproductively that men don't have to deal with, but how that impacts the workplace. These things are at least being talked about now, so that once we start to talk about things and see them as normal, then we can address them.
Yes. Yeah, I think generation has changed. Present generation is not even caring about what others speak about them. It's like, okay, go to hell.
I
That's
know,
it.
it's great. And
Yes.
look, I often speak into the menopause space because I'm post-menopause. And for so many women, it is a difficult time. However, I see it as a portal, because on the other side, you've got all this creativity, all this time that is not, in a sense, limited by the physical functioning of your body. Hallelujah.
Yes. So, what legacy do you hope to leave for the next generation for female entrepreneurs?
If I can leave a legacy that says, oh gosh, she could do it, so can I.
Yes.
I think that's probably the best
Yes.
thing. I do want women to know their power and to operate out of it, and not to buy into the, sit down, be quiet, play small messaging. And that I'd like to leave that legacy too, of women knowing that they're powerful and they can use their power in ways that are good for them and good for the world.
That's really quite impressive. How true is human intuitions?
It's been maligned a lot, because there has been for centuries I think a focus on the mind, and what we can perceive physically, and certainly since the age of enlightenment, where the whole idea of scientific method and things like that, we've downplayed it. But women have had intuitive processes that were valued for millennia. And I really only think it's probably been the last 200 or 300, 400 years that has started to wane, as the dependence on cognitive, scientific, those sorts of things has become more important. Yeah, women have had intuitive processes, what I call our intuitive genius. We've always had it. It's a knowing that that women have, which in many ways they pick up with their senses. You know, what they see, what they hear, what they experience, what they feel. You know, women can get a sense of a vibe in a room. You know, whether you're comfortable with someone. So those things are actually real, and the reality, what's happening now is people are starting to see that these things are actually real. Like men talk about their gut instinct, you know, or what does your gut say? And guys know what they're talking about. If a man says to them, well, what does your gut tell you? And it's not necessarily about making, you know, putting a set of pros and cons about a decision. You know, the guy goes, well, I feel, you know, my gut says I should do with it. That's basically the same as women's intuition. It's this sense of knowing without our brains, in a sense, without our brains being switched on. But it's if we could scientifically unpack it, and please, I am not a scientist, I'm not a psychologist, but I have maybe, that's my women's intuition, I have a hunch that there is so much more about our brain that we don't know about. And so what we see as gut instinct or women's intuition is just an aspect of our brain's processes that we haven't actually been able to map yet.
Yes.
But it's a way of knowing and a way of picking up on, because, you know, we are understanding that everything is energy, you know, everything's moving, all the molecules in the microphone is moving, you know, I'm made up of molecules and atoms and energy, I'm exerting energy, you're exerting energy, even though I'm the one who's doing much more movement, but we're both exerting energy. You know, we've only met once before, but from the moment I met you, I felt comfortable with you. I've been in situations where I haven't felt comfortable with a man, I haven't felt comfortable with a woman. That's my intuition saying, I don't trust this person or this person is safe. So, yeah, it's real. How do we translate that into business? I know that wasn't the question you asked, but I think that's where it needs to go. I can only answer from my own perspective in that the woman that I've been involved with, she's been my coach for the last 5 years. I only knew her online, but somehow I knew she was the right person for me.
Yes.
And then, you know, we had a telephone conversation, but I just knew she was the right person for me. How do you know? I don't know. As I said before, I got married last year. My husband and I met online on Plenty of Fish. We start off as a profile. How do you know? You don't know, but somehow you have a sense. You know, well, for my husband, it was, you know, the conversation, the first thing he said to me online, I got this sense of what this person was about. So, yeah, it's not always about the stuff that our brain can connect the dots, but it's whether it's our spirit, our soul, I don't know, another way of knowing that connects what's happening here with something in our past, something in our experience, and it makes sense.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Can you tell me more about the charity you worked?
Yeah, I was approached on LinkedIn. It's so interesting. Zainab approached me and asked me whether I would consider coming on to the board. Now, we did not know each other. We actually hadn't had even really an online conversation. But she reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, would I consider that? And because of my past work with asylum seekers and refugees, that's an area that I am very interested in, that's close to my heart. So when she asked, look, could we have do a Zoom call, I did that. And so we had a chat because she's based in Sydney. The charity is in Sydney, and obviously I'm here in Melbourne. And it really was, I got involved because it was something that's close to my heart. You know, having worked with refugees, it's something that not just interests me, but I've seen the journey that so many of the asylum seekers that I met on Nauru have undertaken and the difficulties that they've had. And I suppose it's just an opportunity for me to share and to give what I can into that situation. So, I've been on the board now for about 18 months, and all I've been able to add into that is my age and experience, because most of the women are young women. They've got young families, so they're in their 20s and 30s. And one of the things that the charity does is that it runs swimming lessons for African kids, because they come from a country, or in many countries in Africa, where being able to swim is just not part of the what you do with your life. Whereas when you're in Australia, you need to be able to swim, and so they're doing that. And most of them are Muslim women. So what they're hoping to do now too is to expand the swimming classes to be able to do it so that the mums can get involved, but you're doing that in a culturally and faith sensitive way, given some of the boundaries that Muslim women have around dress and privacy and things like that. So that's what they're doing. And all I've been able to do is, in a sense, lend my support. Be on the board, give some wisdom, speak out of my experience. I had the opportunity, which was wonderful, only earlier this month. I was in Sydney. I was going to be speaking at a business breakfast, and because they knew I was coming, they wanted to organise an in-person event. And so we had 20 or 30 women, and we talked about women's health, and most of them were African women, most of them were Muslims. And it was just wonderful. I loved it, just being able to speak from my own experience as a woman, period, as a woman. It didn't matter, what our skin colour was, what our faith background, our age, or anything like that. And I think there was probably only about 3 white people in the room. So, I was very much in the minority, but that didn't worry me. I felt at home, and I felt one of the things I loved was that even though superficially, like on the surface, we had differences that were obvious, my age, my skin colour, I wasn't Muslim, I was born here, all of those things made us different. And yet there was so much more that was the same, things that we shared. And for me, that was just the most beautiful thing from the night. And to be able to meet these women who I'd only seen on a Zoom call, to then be able to give them a hug and just meet together, and it was wonderful. So I love being able to do that when I can for things that I'm passionate about, and if I can lend my wisdom and expertise, then I do so.
Yeah, that was really great work you do for charity, and it was really talking to you, and your experience will give a lot of insights to our audience. And thanks for coming the show and sharing your experience. Thank you.
It's been a great conversation. I've loved it.
Yeah, I loved it, really.